Hey guys, Rob here. Today I wanted to have a look at the Fortimail from Fortinet. This is an excellent little device. It's not little, it's a massive device that's full of functionality, flexibility, configuration to protect your on-premise system, email system, from from viruses, spam, phishing attempts, everything that the internet can throw at you. This guy's going to be able to protect you beautifully from it. It's going to give you lots of flexibility to be able to configure it for your specific use case, whatever that might be. And because of that, there's a little bit of complexity in how all these options fit together. There's lots of policies and profiles and settings within Fortimail that can be quite confusing when you first look at it. So I wanted to go through, give you a look at how those fit together and answer some questions if you've got a Fortimail device and you're struggling a little bit to really get it on song. And if you haven't looked at Fortimail and you're interested in this kind of device, it gives you a bit of a look into the interface, how it works, and what the options are for all your configuration. So let's get into it and have a look at the actual device. I've got a setup here. This is purely just a blank VM image with no licensing at the moment. You get a 15-day license to trial it if you need to. Few things aren't configured because of the licensing, but it shouldn't be a problem for us with what we're looking at today. So this is the main dashboard. One thing with the Fortimails, you want to enable advanced view in most cases. There's a few things that get hidden from view if you don't have that turned on. So we've got that there, and we're going to have a look through our policies and our profiles. This is the meat of the Fortimail configuration that give you most of the options for how you're going to receive and send mail, how you're going to protect yourself against viruses, spam, phishing, impersonation attacks, all those kind of things. Policy profiles are pretty straightforward. The session profiles, anti-spam, antiviral, content, resources. We get into authentication and different things that we won't look at today. Policies are a little bit trickier because there's lots of overlapping here, and it's difficult to get your head around until you've really used these for a little bit and read and reread some of the basic documentation to understand how it really works. Now, as with most things, the complexity is there because there's a lot of options in terms of how to configure these devices. Now, that's a flexibility more than anything else that leads itself to a little bit of complexity. But understanding what your use case is, how you need it to work, what you have, and then what the device can do for you, and laying that all out should make it pretty easy in terms of what you need to do, what your configuration needs to look like, and going from there. So hopefully I haven't scared you too much. Really what we're talking about is how does this device receive and send emails and talk to other mail servers and determine whether it's rejecting email, it's receiving email, and what it does once it decides it's going to receive it. How does it process messages in terms of what options is it using? How is it doing its mail filtering? How is it doing its spam detection? Those kind of things. Now, because it's flexible, there's no right way around this, and there's no right way to be able to say these are the anti-spam protection that you need for your mail server. For instance, you might have affiliates, partners, people that you trust and receive email from every day that are either external parties, very close third parties, maybe even be on the same internal network as you, but run a different mail server. And so you want to be able to process those emails differently than you would, say, someone that was just a pure customer or an unknown. And so because of that, we have these three different levels of policies and how we're going to treat incoming connections and email. And they work in slightly different ways, just to be slightly frustrating. So the first one is access control. I should say, we're going to process these from top down as we receive a connection, an inbound connection from our system. Access control, IP policy, and then recipient policy. That's how the Fortimail is going to process these. And some of these are going to have receiving and a delivery option for them. Let's have a look at our first rule here. So I've created a rule, an access control rule. We defined a sender, recipient, and a source. So let's go from the top here. Our sender, we've defined as a user-defined. We can create an external source. We can define it as internal, and we define those elsewhere in the system. we can set up a user group, email group, sorry, and we define those as well. LDAP groups, LDAP verification, we can just have straight up regular expressions, or we can do a straight up user defined. In this case, we've got anything from example.com is going to be our sender that we're going to match to, and it's any recipient. So we can either match on the sender, we can match on the recipient, or we can match on both. We can then have source groups, which are IP based. So in this case, we've got a geo group that we've set up, and we've just decided that we want everything that is part of Andorra, for no reason other than it was close to the top of the list, to be specified here. So we might want to change that and say, look, we just define it for anything, and then we're going to create some actions for them. Or we can create some TLS profiles. So if we want to do some email encryption and enforce that, we can say everything inbound from example.com is going to be enforced to have a TLS description profile and be encrypted for security's sake, because example.com is a partner of ours and they have it set up that they're going to TLS encrypt. But not everyone's going to do that on the internet. So there's options here, and we can mark this email safe and relay. We can just relay it, we can reject it, we can discard it, or we can mark it safe. So there's options that we have here within the access control rule. And this is why we want to have multiple ones defined depending on how we have things set up. This is one option. We can do different things with IP policies, and we can do different things with the recipient policies. But this is the first one. And our Fortimail, when it decides what it's going to do with an email, is going to start matching through these different rules in the different types of policies. Remember that. We have the same option for delivery. I would suspect that this is going to be really around three things really. A TLS profile. If you're sending to a partner and you want to make sure that you TLS encrypt all your emails because your partner is expecting that, because you guys have got together and decided that you can TLS encrypt. It's not very hard. Here's a place where you want to set that up. Everything to, say example.com again. Let's type him in. Is going to be is going to be TLS encrypted. Now, the other option that we have here is IP pool profile. So we can specify some IP pools, and that's going to enable how we connect over a set of IPs and what our system host name is going to be, what our certificate might be, and how we set those things up. Why would you want to do that? Well, potentially you're going to have different domains internally on your email system, and you may want to ensure that when you connect externally that you're still using the same domain name, or just using the right domain name based on the sender that you're sending as. So you may have domain 1, domain 2, and you can set those up in IP pool profiles. The other one you can also do is an encryption profile, and this is around end user encryption. Email encryption for end users. So the email itself can be encrypted, and then you can specify, let's click on it, how people actually get that email. So there's push and pull encryption. It uses a protocol called IPE. You can also use SMIME if you want to do just basic SMIME of email encryption. The IPE is fantastic. You get an email, it's encrypted. It tells you that you've got an encrypted email waiting for you. You can click on a link, takes you back to the Fortimail device. You can put in passwords, all those kind of things to be able to then decrypt your email that you've been sent. It's an excellent way of sending anything that you want encrypted, passwords, documents, those kind of things, with a little bit more flexibility than saying, let's put a password on a Word document, or try and send you something, an encrypted zip file or something like that, and try and do some basic things on encryption and those kind of encryption at that level. That may not work. Fortimail gives you another option that may be a lot more flexible and happier for email distribution. Those are access controls. IP policies. We get similar things here. We're talking around policies based around IP. So in this case, we've got 2 that are defined by default. I haven't created these. These are the default out of the box. One's IPv4, one's IPv6. IPv6. Now, we specify source and destination by IP. We specify an action. So we can say anything from a specific set of IP addresses we're just going to reject because we don't trust them, we've had problems with them before, or whatever you want to do. or we scan and continue through. And this is where our profiles come into play. So we have 5 profiles that we can use, and 4 that are probably the ones that we want to think about: session, anti-spam, antiviral, and content. Session is around the email to email SMTP session that we're creating at that point in time and how we respond to that. Then the other 3 are really around, well, like I say, one's anti-spam. Is this a spam email? Does this have a virus in it? And what are we going to do with the content of the email as we process it? So it's a slightly higher level than what we've had in the access control. We're now trying to determine whether this is a server that we want to connect to, and whether the email that we're receiving is an email that we want to receive. And we have our same IP pool options here that we can specify. The nice thing of creating profiles here is we can reuse some of these settings. We're not setting, IP pool in an IP-based policy, and our access control rule is something else. Now, there's options around here for authentication and access. Some of these will be more specific around if we're running the Fortimail as an actual email server, how that's going to work. And if we're doing authenticated users, authenticated SMTP. One thing to note, and one thing I want to have a look here, is this option at the bottom. Because we're processing all 3 of these policies for every email and connection that we're receiving or delivering on the Fortimail, sometimes we're going to need to say, if we match at this level, don't keep matching further on. And this is an option here. It's slightly hidden away in our miscellaneous, so we can kind of miss it. But sometimes you want to say, hey, once you've got to this level, don't keep going down the recipient policy. That's enough. We don't need to do that. This is where we might turn that on and off. It's a little one. There's a little tip for you. Okay, let's look at recipient policies. So recipient policies are going to give us a similar thing. And this time we're going to go into what all these things kind of do. So we've got different domains we can set up on our system. At this point in time, we've only got one. So we've just got a system domain. Everything's the same. If you have different domains behind your Fortimail, you're running 3, 4, however many different domains, you can set those up and then create different rules based on those domains. This is where the flexibility comes in that then can make it quite complicated later on. Understanding this, you may decide you don't need to set up that many domains because you're not going to do anything different based on that. But maybe you are. That's up to you. Choices are all valid. Let's look at these profiles in a little bit more detail. So we've got an anti-spam. This is the default ones that have been configured, but it's going to give us a look at some options anyway. So here's our options. For each profile that we're creating, we can create a default action. So potentially, in this case, we're going to send anything that we detect as spam is going to go into our user quarantine files. We can tag it, we can put it into the system quarantine, we can reject, we can discard, and then we can tag subjects and different things. All these actions are configurable. So here's an option around the profile for user quarantine. So we can tag, we can insert headers, we can put disclaimers, we can deliver it to an alternate host. We can do all sorts of cool stuff with it. Flexibility, really good. Okay, here's our options for anti-spam. The biggest one, FortiGuard. So Fortimail, it's all around FortiGuard for everything. Goes back and talks to Fortinet. And the FortiGuard server's there and says, hey, I've got this email, I've got this connection, what am I going to do with it? IP reputation. Is it a reputable IP? What do I want to do? Let's just do some things around URL categories if we're defining URLs in our emails. And this also lets us do things around click protection, which is where we can rewrite the actual URL that's in an email to something safer. That actually puts us through to the Fortimail so that we can make some determination on that URL based on what the FortiGuard is telling us. The IP reputation, you want to have this turned on. I've seen massive amounts of emails rejected straight up based on the IP reputation that FortiGuard is telling the Fortimails. So it's really important. You get that as part of your subscription. If I had a license on here, it wouldn't be telling me that I didn't have that licensing. Grey listing is an interesting feature as well. That allows us to get somewhere between whitelisting and blacklisting, where new connections into our Fortimail are delayed or delivery is delayed until we can determine that the source is true. So what it actually does is to reject the email initially and then see if the server connects again on the same IP address with the same details to make sure that it's not getting sent out from a variety of different mail servers, or it's not being retried and things like that. It's a little bit complicated. You probably can be okay turning it off, because otherwise it can delay emails coming in. Depends on if you have that as a problem, but it's worth having a look at. SPF Sender Protection framework. That's going to be your DNS set up to ensure that, hey, if you're example.com and you're sending emails from something that doesn't match the SPF records in the DNS, then fail, do whatever you want to do. That one's critical. You want to have that turned on. You get different levels here, so you can start saying, hey, the sender alignment, this could be suspicious. This is, problematic, all those kind of things. DMARC goes along with some of that kind of stuff as well in terms of SPF and a few other options. You can turn these on and off and do different things based on it. You can have behavior analysis. So it's a level again. Hey, what's going on with this? Is it good or bad? And that's part of the Fortimail magic, I suppose, and how it determines that. Same with the header analysis and the heuristic type of things. And here we've got some options around thresholds and percentages and all those kind of things. Then we can put our own blacklist in here as well. So you can define the addresses that you want to use if you subscribe to these kind of services, or you've got free ones, and away you go. We can define ban words, safe with words, all those kind of things. One thing that's really useful that I highly encourage people to look at turning on is impersonation analysis and the impersonation profiles. If you've ever received a phishing email from Rob Hogarth at something or other, and it says it's from Rob Hogarth, but when you look at the actual email address, that's not Rob at all. This is what can help you on those kind of things. Generally, they're phishing emails. Hey, I'm the general manager. I can't talk right now. Go buy me a bunch of iTunes gift cards because I need to send them to a customer. Send me all the details of the cards. Don't ring me because I'm too busy. So in here, we can set up and say, hey, if you're going to be Rob, you better come from Rob at example.com. And if you don't, then reject the email. And that's really good. So I don't know of a way in the system to kind of set this up with an LDAP match or anything like that at this point in time. I would suggest, though, that anyone who has purchasing authority in your organization, anyone who is a board member, is an owner of a company, or is in the finance department, set up a bunch of impersonation rules in this environment here. That's going to protect you from those kind of phishing scams. It's really, really powerful. And it's really, really simple to do. So let's keep going through here. We've got some dictionary options here. We can set up dictionary groups. And that's around your words and things like that. Hey, and credit card ratings, those kind of things. Hey, if there's also credit cards, what are we going to do with that? Now, remember, these is inbound and outbound. So outbound, if people are sending credit cards, outbound, social security numbers, banking details, those kind of things. If they're not supposed to be sending those for lots of good reasons that you wouldn't want to be sending those, then, hey, let's start stopping those things dead. Image spam is something that you can turn on as well. There's also options in the licensing for adult image scanning as well, so you can't get any of that kind of stuff through. And there's newsletter, suspicious newsletter, Bayesian, all those kind of options there as well. So there's lots of these. The key on some of this with the Fortinet devices that you'll find, a lot of these things are turned off by default. The Fortinet option kind of default behavior for lots of different things. This applies for FortiGates as well as Fortimail, FortiEMS, Forti everything. A lot of things are turned off by default. It's your option as a customer, as a MSP, as a user to be able to turn on the features that you want to do. So out of the box, if you just ran with this default kind of thing, well, based on this, it's going to do a few things, but you're going to potentially be very disappointed with your Fortimail performance because a lot of these options aren't turned on, purely because that's a design choice by Fortinet to be able to say, hey, all the options are there. It's up to you guys to turn it on. So that's one thing to be aware with Fortimail and any kind of mail filtering. Look, it's up to you, but you probably want to start going a little bit softly at first before you start going too hardcore with a lot of the things that you're doing, because you may find you don't want to get too many false positives. You want to be able to make sure that you've got this thing tuned correctly for what you want to do. That's up to you, though. You can turn everything on and no one gets any email. And obviously, if you don't get an email, you can't get any spam. Boom. It's problem solved, right? Up to you guys. Look, let's keep going through. So this is our antivirus. We can see here, we've got a lot of options around kind of some of the different types of viruses that we might get. And then we've got FortiSandbox options. So we can send things through our FortiSandbox, whether that's FortiSandbox Cloud, FortiSandbox On-Prem if you have that device. These are all licensed things. You need to have a look at them. And then that will allow you to create different actions based on the risk level in this case, based on the different types. So look, those are your options that you've got in antivirus. This part of it actually is probably quite good from a default perspective. The only option that I found when I've been working with them is that I've had people that I trust sending me things that look like they're viruses because they're executable files or something that I would generally not trust from an untrusted source. So having these IP policies or recipient policies give me the option to be able to say, hey, look, for everyone else, I don't expect to be getting these kind of emails from the general internet, but for this guy, this group of people, I do. So let's tune these things down a little bit. Okay, content. So content, when we get attachments, what are we doing? Can we get executable files? Can we get video? Can we get encrypted? Is it MS Office file? What do we do in those cases? We can set those up. Boom. We can set those up. We can set up actions, and we can do things with them. User quarantine is really good just to be able to shoot a lot of these things through, and then end users can make some of these options if we're not sure. Other things we want to kind of, send them to spam, send them to a system quarantine, just reject it wholly. Depends on what you want to do. And here's some options around what we want to do. How are we going to scan different things? Are we going to detect embedded components? Are we going to look at MS Office? Are we going to look at Visio, OpenOffice, PDFs? Do you want to go down to that level and start scanning through and determining whether it's a thing or not? This is where adult image analysis comes in again. If we've actually purchased the license, it doesn't come with a license by default with the basic licensing. Up to you guys if that's useful or important or not, obviously. And then we can go through things like a click protection, which is really fantastic. Is this bad? Is this a risky click of the day? If so, rewrite this so that we can either remove the content or we can keep it, redirect it, do all sorts of things with those options. That's a really handy part of that. So if you're getting clicks that are not to where they say they are, hey, this is coming from your bank. No, it's not. We can stop that dead on the Fortimail. We can check out archiving, and we can do some file password decryption as well. So if you've got things that are password encrypted, you can try some commonly used passwords to decrypt those. Look, up to you whether you want to do that. Obviously, if it gets towards the bottom of these lists, sometimes these are things that are a little bit more optional. There's your content profiles. Now, one thing we didn't go through, we'll have a look here as well. We've got some similar options on advanced options for SMTP sender identity, authentication, if we're starting to go down that kind of path. One thing we haven't looked at, session profiles. Session profiles are going to give you a lot of options around SMTP connections and what we're going to do with them. So right off the bat, we can see we're looking at, are we getting spammed purely because of the number of connections we're getting from a certain client in a period? Is our sender reputable? How do we throttle that? What do we do? Is our endpoint reputable if we're sending out to an endpoint? So if it decides that this is an endpoint that we want to send mail to, but we've got a weird lookup, we can do that for our outbound things. And we can do validation with DKIM, SPF, all those kind of things. They're the kind of things that you want to be turning on, and some of your session limits. So we can make sure, hey, if we're sending things like hello, HELO commands at the beginning of our SMTP. Are they right? Do they match? All those kind of things. Is your email service set up correctly? Or your limits in terms of, how many emails can you send from a session at one point in time? A lot of the time, the defaults for these things are going to be pretty useful, but we can tune these. So maybe you're going to have a partner that's going to send you heaps of email, and you're going to reach limits. Create a new session profile, create a new IP policy if you know their IP, and set it up. Here we go. We can get around that. We don't need to do SPF check for these guys. We know they're safe. It's coming from a known set of IP addresses, and therefore we can do away with a lot of the checking and a lot of the limits that we might place on someone that's not known. So there's some good options there. We can also do some header manipulation. If we've added headers, we can remove certain headers within an email. If you've got a chain of different servers, or you've got an email chain that's passing email systems back and forth, you may have reason to remove these. You may want to remove certain things before they go out as part of a sending, exchanges putting things in, or whatever's happening. You can do that. We can enable sender safe list checking and block lists. So we can just set up whitelist and block lists internally, and recipients as well. Let's have a quick look at those. We can create a list. It's a list. Boom. Boom. There we go. I'm on a list now. And okay, I've marked it safe. Be careful with marking safe lists because they're not global. There's different levels of them. Some of them apply for a profile, apply for a policy, apply globally or not. So just be careful. Do some testing when you set up those things. They may not react the same way as what you think they will do. So there we go. There's some of the options around what you can do with Fortimail. Obviously, you got to remember access control, IP policy, recipient policy, in that order is how they're defined. The profiles, look, you want to set up profiles the way that makes sense for your organization. Generally, you want to have some profiles for untrusted, regular email people on the internet, and then some for partners, depending on how your company operates and what it does on a day-to-day basis. So look, there's probably no one right answer at all for anyone. There's probably lots of wrong answers on how to do it badly, but it's all around planning. Don't be dismayed by the number of options here. It can be a little bit daunting. Understand how it works. Understand what you need it to do. And you will be able to come up with a way that makes sense for you to be able to say, here's how we define these things, here's how we mix them together, and here's how do we make them work for us when we need to add people onto a list over here or add people to a policy at this level. This is how we define our disaster recovery sites. This is how we define our subsites for different customers or different parts of the business. All of those things are possible. All of those things are easily configurable. And it's just a matter of understanding what's going to work for you in terms of how you put things together. Fortimail is a fantastic device. Like I said, they're not necessarily the cheapest part of any Forti solution, but they are extremely powerful. So if you're interested, have a chat to us. We can help you. We can help you with some configuration. We can help you with the device. We can get things in. We can do trials for you. Anything you want to do, we can rock and roll with you. Any questions, put them onto bottom of this YouTube video. Send me an email, sales@mstore.com.au. We're happy to help. We've done this before for customers and it's worked out fantastically well. Hope this has been helpful for everyone. See you later. Bye.